The maid who inherited the billionaire's mansion. But what was in the basement destroyed? Everything. Imagine waking up one day and discovering that you, a simple housemaid, have inherited a fortune worth tens of millions. The mansion, the jewels, the bank accounts, all yours. It sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this inheritance came with a price? A secret so dark it would turn the dream into a nightmare. Maria Suarez was 58 years old when she received the news. 35 years of her life dedicated to a single person, Amelia d'Avalon, the most mysterious billionaire in the region. As the lawyers read the will aloud, Maria felt the weight of the stares from Amelia's relatives, eyes filled with hatred, envy, and disbelief. How could a maid inherit everything? But what no one knew, not even Maria until that fateful night, was that the mansion held something far beyond luxury and wealth. In the locked basement, buried beneath decades of secrets, lay the truth Amelia d'Avalon had taken almost to her grave. Almost. When Maria found that door and decided to open it, she had no idea she was about to uncover a past that would change not only her life, but the memory of one of the most powerful women who ever lived. What she saw down there wasn't just forgotten belongings. It was evidence, it was history, it was horror. Are you ready to discover what a loyal maid found in the basement of her billionaire employer? Get ready, because this story will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, secrets, and the true meaning of inheritance. 35 years of silence. Maria Suarez was 23 years old the first time she knocked on the door of the d'Avalon mansion. It was a grey morning, and her hands trembled as she held the crumpled piece of paper with the address scribbled in pen. She had come from far away, from a life where luxury was a distant, almost fictional word. Raised by a seamstress grandmother who had died leaving behind nothing but debts and memories, Maria knew this job interview was her only chance. Amelia d'Avalon opened the door herself. Tall, with straight shoulders and amber eyes that seemed to pierce through people, she didn't smile. She simply looked Maria up and down with an expression impossible to read. "Do you know how to cook?" Amelia asked bluntly. "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied, forcing steadiness into her voice. "Do you know how to clean without breaking anything?" "Yes, ma'am." "And do you know when to stay silent?" Maria blinked, confused, but nodded. "Then you're hired." That day Maria had no idea that this last question, about silence, would be the most important of all. In the first years, she learned the household routine with military precision, waking up at 5 in the morning, preparing coffee exactly as Amelia liked it, strong, no sugar with a hint of cardamom, polishing the silver every Tuesday, watering the white orchids that filled the winter garden. Amelia wasn't cruel, but she was distant. She treated Maria with professional respect, never affection. She traveled often, always alone, and returned with heavy suitcases that Maria was never allowed to open. When she had visitors, rarely, they were always men in dark suits who arrived late at night and left before dawn. During those moments, Maria learned to disappear, to become invisible. "Maria," Amelia said once, years later, as they were organizing the library, "you are the only person I trust." Maria was surprised. "Why, ma'am?" "Because you never ask questions." And it was true. Maria never asked about the trips, about the men in suits, about the nights she heard Amelia crying in her room, or about the locked door in the basement that no one ever entered. Maria did her job, received her generous pay, and lived in the small cottage behind the property that Amelia had given her. Over time, something strange happened. Maria began to feel genuine affection for that enigmatic woman. She saw in her not just an employer, but a lonely soul trapped in her own fortress of secrets. Amelia, in turn, began to reveal small fragments of vulnerability. She spoke about her harsh childhood, about the authoritarian father who built the d'Avalon empire on other people's sweat and blood, about the disastrous marriage that lasted only 3 years and left no children. "Family," Amelia murmured one night while Maria served her chamomile tea, "is the biggest lie they tell us. Blood means nothing. Loyalty, yes, loyalty is everything." Maria didn't answer, but she never forgot those words. The years passed like silent pages in a book. Maria watched Amelia grow old, her black hair gradually streaked with silver, the wrinkles deepening around her amber eyes. She herself aged too, her grey hair always tied in a tight bun, her hands calloused from constant work. But there was peace in that routine, a predictability Maria learned to appreciate, until Amelia fell ill. It happened suddenly and brutally, an aggressive cancer that doctors discovered too late. Maria became more than a maid. She was a nurse, a companion, a confidant. She held Amelia's hand through the nights of pain, wiped her face when the fever rose, read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. "Maria," Amelia whispered one night, her voice barely audible, "I've done things that will affect you when I'm gone. Don't talk like that, ma'am. You'll get better." "No, I won't. And when you find out, Amelia gripped Maria's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll forgive me." A chill ran down Maria's spine. "Forgive you for what, ma'am?" But Amelia had already closed her eyes, the morphine dragging her back to sleep. 3 weeks later, Amelia d'Avalon died in her bed with Maria holding her hand. The funeral was small, only a few dozen people, most of them curious or opportunistic. Distant relatives of Amelia arrived dressed in black, with expressions of performative grief that fooled no one. And then came the reading of the will. The lawyer's office smelled of old leather and ambition. Dr. Henrique Vasconcelos, a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses, arranged his papers with meticulous precision as those present settled into the padded chairs. Maria sat in the corner, almost hidden, wearing her simplest black dress. She didn't understand why she had been called. She imagined that perhaps Amelia had left her some money, maybe the equivalent of a year's salary. That would already be generous and unexpected. Amelia's nephews occupied the main seats. Bernardo d'Avalon, a heavy-set man in his 40s who smelled of expensive whiskey and contempt, his wife Clarice, thin as a bird with the cold eyes of a snake, and Isabelle d'Avalon, the youngest niece, whose face could barely conceal the greed shining in her eyes. "Very well, Dr. Vasconcelos began, clearing his throat. "We are gathered here for the reading of the last will and testament of Amelia Sophia d'Avalon, who passed away on the 23rd of last month. The document was prepared 6 months ago in full possession of her mental faculties and properly witnessed." Bernardo leaned forward, tense. Maria saw his large hands gripping the arms of his chair. "I, Amelia Sophia d'Avalon," the lawyer read, "being of sound mind and full understanding, hereby declare as my sole and universal heir Mrs. Maria Aparecida Suarez, who served me with incomparable loyalty for 35 years. The silence that followed was deafening. "To her I leave the totality of my estate," Dr. U. Vasconcelos continued, ignoring the pale faces around the table, "including the d'Avalon mansion and all adjacent properties, my jewelry collection valued at approximately 18 million, all bank accounts and investments totaling roughly 73 million, as well as all company shares in the d'Avalon Foundation." "This is outrageous," Bernardo exploded, slamming his hand on the table. "A maid? My aunt was clearly senile." "Your aunt," corrected Dr. Vasconcelos calmly, "underwent a full psychiatric evaluation at the time this will was made. She was perfectly lucid, and there's more." Maria felt the world spinning. 73 million, 18 million in jewels. The mansion. It couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. "To my nephews, Bernardo, Clarice, and Isabel," the lawyer went on, "I leave a symbolic sum of 100,000 each, in the hope they will learn that family is not defined by blood, but by presence. They were never present. Maria always was." Clarice let out a strangled sound, something between hysterical laughter and a sob. Isabel had turned pale, her lips moving soundlessly. Bernardo's face flushed red, the veins in his neck bulging. "This won't stand," he growled, pointing a finger at Maria. "We'll contest this. We'll prove she manipulated my aunt, took advantage of a sick and vulnerable woman." "Feel free to try," said Dr. Vasconcelos, his voice as cold as steel. "But I must warn you." Amelia anticipated this reaction and left very specific instructions. Any attempt to contest the will result in the entire inheritance being donated to charity. In other words, if you try to take anything from Maria, you all lose. Absolutely everything. Bernardo stood up so abruptly his chair toppled backward. "That manipulative witch humiliates us even from the grave. Out. Now," said Dr. Vasconcelos, pointing to the door. As the nephews stormed out, throwing daggers with their eyes at Maria, she remained seated, frozen in disbelief. Her hands trembled violently. "Maria," the lawyer said gently after the door closed, "breathe. I know this is a lot to take in." "Why?" Maria whispered. "Why did she do this?" Dr. Vasconcelos sighed, removing his glasses to clean them. "Amelia told me something when we drafted this will. She said, Maria was more of a daughter to me than any blood child could ever have been. She saw me, she stayed, and now she will discover who I truly was. When she does, she'll understand." Discover what? The lawyer hesitated, a flicker of concern crossing his face. She didn't specify, but she made me promise one thing, to give you this, personally. He handed her a sealed envelope, sealed with deep red wax. On the back, in Amelia's elegant handwriting, for Maria, open only when alone in the mansion. Maria took it with trembling hands. The paper was thick, expensive, and somehow seemed to pulse with an unspoken urgency. There's one more thing, the lawyer added quietly. Amelia left specific instructions about a part of the mansion, the basement. She said you'd find answers there, but she also left this warning. He slid another piece of paper across the table. Maria picked it up and read Amelia's words, written just days before her death. The basement holds my truth. When you find it, you will face a choice. Destroy everything and live with the guilt of silence, or reveal it and live with the weight of truth. Choose wisely, my dear Maria, and forgive me if you can. Maria left the office in a daze. Outside, Bernardo was waiting, leaning against a luxury car, smoking a cigar. Enjoy it while you can, little maid, he spat, because this won't last. I'll find out what you did, how you manipulated my aunt, and when I do, you'll wish you'd never set foot in that house. Maria didn't respond. She simply walked toward the taxi Dr. Vasconcelos had called for her, clutching the envelope against her chest like a talisman. She didn't know it yet, but Bernardo was partly right about one thing. She truly would wish she had never entered certain parts of that house, especially the basement. The first night alone in the mansion was surreal. Maria had slept in the back cottage for 35 years. Now the keys to the main entrance weighed in her pocket like lead. She walked through the grand foyer, the same place where she'd been interviewed decades ago, and her footsteps echoed across the Italian marble like the slow drumbeats of an omen. Everything looked different now that it was hers. The crimson velvet curtains, the crystal chandeliers, the oil portraits on the walls, all seemed to watch her with a quiet intensity she had never felt before, as if the house itself knew she didn't truly belong there. For the first time in her life, Maria climbed the grand staircase without carrying something to clean or repair. Her fingers slid along the polished mahogany handrail. On the second floor, she hesitated before Amelia's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open slowly. The room was exactly as Amelia had left it, except now it lacked the presence that had once defined it. The bed was perfectly made. Maria herself had done it the morning after Amelia's death, and the curtains were open, letting in the silvery light of the full moon. Maria sat on the edge of the bed, exactly where Amelia used to sit to put on her shoes every morning. That's when the tears came. Sudden, violent, uncontrollable. She cried for Amelia, for herself, for the absurdity of it all. How could a humble maid become the owner of a fortune? How would she deal with lawyers, bankers, and the venomous hatred of the nephews? When the tears finally stopped, Maria realized the house was completely dark. She hadn't turned on any lights, and now the mansion was shrouded in deep shadows. She stood to turn on the lamp when she heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps, coming from below, from the first floor. Maria froze. The mansion was locked. She had personally checked every door and window. She stood motionless, holding her breath, listening. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate. Not the frantic sound of an intruder, but the confident steps of someone who knew every board of the floor, every corner of that house. Maria's heart pounded so hard, she feared it could be heard. She forced herself to move, stepping carefully out of the room and down the staircase. The foyer light was off. She ran her hand along the wall until she found the switch. Click. Light flooded the hall, empty, completely empty, but the footsteps hadn't stopped. Now they came from somewhere else, from the east wing corridor. Maria followed the sound, turning on lights as she went. She passed the music room, the library, Amelia's study. Then the footsteps stopped, right in front of the basement door. Maria stood frozen, staring at that heavy oak door, locked with an old rusted padlock that looked untouched for decades. The wood was dark, almost black, the iron hinges creaking softly in the draught. She had never been inside. Amelia had always kept that place locked, and whenever Maria had asked, on the rare occasions she dared, the response was always the same. It's just old storage. Nothing that needs attention. But now, standing alone in that hallway, Maria felt something different emanating from the door. Not curiosity, something deeper. A pull, as if something beyond that wooden barrier was waiting to be found. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the rough surface, when a sharp sound made her jump. Ring! The mansion's old telephone mounted on the hallway wall. No one used landlines anymore. In fact, Maria hadn't even realized the line still worked. With trembling hands, she picked up the receiver. Hello? Static. Just a low, hissing static. Hello? Who's there? And then, so faint she almost didn't hear it, a voice, feminine, whispering. Basement. Maria dropped the phone. It swung on the cord, thudding rhythmically against the wooden paneling as the static continued to hum. She backed away, heart racing, and ran upstairs. She locked herself in the guest room, pushing a chair against the door. She stayed awake the entire night, watching shadows dance on the walls, listening to every creak, every sigh of the ancient mansion. When dawn finally came, painting the sky in gold and pink, Maria felt ridiculous. Old houses make noises, pipes, wood shifting with temperature, and the phone, probably a prank call or a crossed line. But when she went downstairs to make coffee, she found something that shattered that rational explanation. On the kitchen table, perfectly scented, lay the envelope Dr. Vasconcelos had given her. The red wax seal was broken. The letter was open. Maria knew with absolute certainty that she had left that envelope in the desk drawer, sealed. She hadn't touched it since arriving home. With shaking hands, she unfolded the letter. Amelia's elegant handwriting filled the single page. My dear Maria, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have inherited not only my possessions but also my secrets. Forgive me for placing this burden upon you, but there was no one else I could trust. In the basement you will find the truth about my family, about me, about things I have done, and things I allowed to be done. For decades I kept those doors locked, not out of shame, but necessity. Some truths are dangerous. Some truths destroy not only the one who speaks them, but everyone around. There is a key. You will find it at the bottom of my main jewelry box, the ebony one with pearl inlays. It opens the basement lock. What you choose to do with what you find there, that decision is yours and yours alone. But know this, the Davalon Empire was not built on honesty. Blood fertilized these foundations, and in the basement lies the evidence of crimes that were never paid for. You may destroy everything, burn it, bury it again, and live your life in comfort and silence as I did. Or you may expose the truth and face the consequences, for there will be consequences, my dear. Powerful people do not like to see their ghosts unearthed. I chose silence, but you have always been braver than I. With all the love that remains in my broken heart, Amelia. Maria read the letter 3 times, each word carving itself deeper into her mind. Unpaid crimes, blood, ghosts. She went upstairs to Amelia's room, straight to the walk-in closet, and found the ebony jewelry box. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Diamond necklaces, emerald rings, platinum bracelets, a fortune resting casually on dark velvet. At the bottom, taped beneath the false lid, was the key. Small, bronze, darkened by time, its teeth uneven, its handle engraved with the Davalon crest, a raven perched atop a crossed sword and scale. Maria held it, feeling its weight. It was more than metal. It was decision. It was destiny. She could throw it away, have the basement sealed with concrete, live out her life in luxury, pretending the letter never existed. But then she remembered Amelia's face in those final weeks, the desperation in her eyes, the words, "Promise me you'll forgive me." Maria slipped the key into her pocket. That night, she would return to the basement and uncover the truth Amelia Davalon had spent a lifetime hiding. Maria spent the entire day trying to talk herself out of going down to that basement. She cleaned the whole house, something that didn't need doing, considering she'd scrubbed everything just days before the funeral. But mechanical work had always helped her think, and now she needed clarity. The Davalon mansion had 17 rooms, not counting the service quarters. Every space told a story. The music room with the grand piano no one had touched in 20 years. The library with its thousands of volumes organized by color, one of Amelia's eccentricities. The solarium where she used to take tea every afternoon at 4. As she wiped down the furniture, Maria found herself reliving memories, the time Amelia taught her to play chess in that very library. The Christmas when, surprisingly, Amelia gave her a silver necklace, simple but the first piece of jewelry Maria had ever owned. The mornings she found Amelia crying silently on the veranda, looking out at the garden, and knew she should only bring tea and ask no questions. Some pains, Amelia had said once, can't be soothed with words, only with silent presence. Maria had always respected that. But now, with the key in her pocket, she wondered if silence had been a virtue or an unwitting complicity. Around 7 in the evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and purple, Maria finally made her decision. She couldn't live in that house, with all its grandeur and all its secrets, without knowing the truth. Amelia had given her not only a material inheritance, but a moral responsibility. She needed to find out what was in the basement. Maria changed clothes, putting on practical trousers and a long-sleeved blouse. She grabbed a powerful flashlight from the pantry. The basement's electricity probably didn't work. A fully charged cell phone and a bottle of water. She wasn't sure why she brought water, but it felt sensible. She went down the stairs slowly, each step seeming to amplify the sound of her footsteps. The mansion was strangely silent. Not even the old pendulum clock in the hall made its familiar tick-tock. The corridor leading to the basement door seemed longer than it had in the morning. Shadows stretched along the walls, turning the ancestral portraits into spectators with dark, accusing eyes. Maria stopped before the door. The rusted padlock hung from the iron staple like a silent sentinel. She took the key from her pocket and for a moment just held it. Last chance to back out. Last chance to choose ignorance. But then she thought of the voice on the phone, of that letter that had appeared opened, of the footsteps in the night. It was as if the house itself were begging for its secrets to be revealed. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease for something so old. The padlock popped open with a metallic click that cracked the silence like a gunshot. Maria drew a deep breath and pushed the door. The air that came out was dense, heavy with damp and mold, but also with something else. A sweet, unsettling smell she couldn't place. The darkness beyond the door was absolute, as if it absorbed the light rather than merely lacking it. She switched on the flashlight. The beam sliced through the dark, revealing a steep stone staircase descending into the depths. The walls were bare brick, wet and blotched with greenish stains that might have been moss or something worse. Maria began to descend. Each step made the wood of the upper treads groan, and she had the irrational feeling the stairs might collapse at any moment, swallowing her into the bowels of the house. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted the steps, needing something concrete to focus on. 10, 11, 12. The temperature dropped gradually, and she could see her own breath condensing in the cold air. 15, 16, 17. At last, her feet touched solid ground. She swept the flashlight around, trying to take stock of the space. The basement was enormous, far larger than the mansion's floor plan suggested. It stretched in multiple directions, with stone arches dividing the space into sections. Thick pillars supported the vaulted ceiling, their shadows dancing grotesquely in the jittering light. But it wasn't the size that drew the eye. It was the contents. Boxes, dozens, no, hundreds of boxes, stacked with careful precision. Some of wood, some of metal, others reinforced cardboard. All of them labeled with codes Maria didn't understand. A1943073, B1956142, C1978089. She approached the nearest box, a simple wooden one with rusty hinges. It wasn't locked. She lifted the lid. Inside were files. Manila folders, yellowed with age, stuffed with typewritten documents. Maria took the first one, her eyes running over the text in the flashlight's beam. It was a contract, dated 1953, between Augusto d'Avalon, Amelia's father, Maria recognized the name, and a mining company. The terms were technical, but even with her limited understanding, she grasped the essentials. The d'Avalon company was purchasing rights to exploit indigenous lands for absurdly low values, using intermediaries to facilitate agreements. Maria picked up another document. This one was a series of black and white photographs, faded with time but still legible. They showed men, some in suits, others in military uniforms, standing before what looked like a destroyed village. In the background, burned structures. On the back of one photo, a note in faded ink. Relocation completed. Resistance eliminated. December 1953. Maria's hands began to shake. She closed that folder and opened another box. More contracts. More photographs. An entire folder dedicated to special payments. Lists of names followed by amounts of money, some with small annotations. Silenced. Relocated. Problem solved. She recoiled from the box as if it were burning her. Her heart hammered wildly. This couldn't be real, couldn't be true. The d'Avalon family had built its empire on what? Land theft? Violence? Murder? But there was more. Much more. Maria moved on, the flashlight revealing increasingly disturbing sections of the basement. In one corner she found clothing. Women's dresses, children's suits, carefully sealed in plastic. Tags attached to each piece with names, dates, and a single word that made her nauseous. Evidence. She didn't want to understand what that meant, but her mind treacherously began assembling a horrific puzzle. Farther on, a different section. Metal shelving crammed with journals. Dozens of them, leather-bound, organized chronologically. Maria pulled one at random, dated 1971. The handwriting was masculine, angular. She opened to a random page and read, March 15th. The problem with the Santos family was resolved tonight. It cost more than we expected, but we could not allow the accusations to reach the courts. The bodies were handled according to usual protocol. Amelia almost found out. She saw blood in the car. I told her it was a deer I hit on the road. She believed me. My daughter is still so innocent. How long can I keep her from the truth? Maria dropped the journal. She staggered backward, tripping over a box and nearly knocking the flashlight from her hand. Her breaths came in short, panicked gasps. Amelia knew. She had to have known. Not everything, maybe not at first, but eventually she had found out. And she had kept these files, these proofs, hidden down here for decades. Why? Why not destroy it all? Why not report it? The answer came in a voice that could have been Amelia's or her own conscience, because doing so would have destroyed everything. The fortune, the name, the life I built on the ruins my father left behind. Maria forced herself onward. She had to see it all. She had to understand the full extent of the horror. At the back of the basement, separated from the other sections by a heavy curtain of black velvet, stood a metal door. Unlike anything else, modern, with an electronic lock blinking a tiny red light. Maria tried the handle. Locked, of course, but next to the door, taped to the wall with ordinary adhesive, so jarringly mundane amid all that horror, was an envelope. Her name was written across the front in big letters, Maria. She opened it with numb fingers. Inside, a keycard and a short note. This room contains the most recent files, the crimes that continued even after my father's death, the crimes I committed, or abetted by omission. If you've come this far, you deserve to know everything. The code is 1204, our date, the day you first stepped into this house. Forgive me. Maria didn't remember Amelia caring about or even noting sentimental dates, but apparently she did. She remembered the exact day Maria had entered her life. With trembling hands, Maria swiped the card. The light blinked green. She typed 1204. A metallic click. The door opened. What she saw on the other side made her legs give way. She fell to her knees, the flashlight rolling across the floor, its beam spinning wildly. They weren't just files. They were people. Maria didn't know how long she stayed there, kneeling on the cold floor, unable to process what she was seeing. Her mind refused to accept it, to assemble the pieces of that impossible image. They weren't living people, she gradually realized, as reason returned in small, painful waves. But they weren't simply corpses or skeletons either. They were preservations. The room was a kind of macabre museum. Lined walls, temperature-controlled air, soft lighting that came on automatically when she entered. And along the walls, in pristine glass cases, were displays. Each display contained personal belongings carefully arranged. Photographs, identity documents, pieces of clothing, personal effects. And next to each collection, a plaque with a name, date of birth, date of disappearance, and a case number. Maria forced herself to stand and approach the first display. Rosa Mendez, born June 14, 1932. Disappeared August 23, 1957. Case D0347. The photograph showed a young, beautiful woman smiling at the camera, holding a baby. Beside it, a floral cotton dress carefully folded. Documents that appeared to be property deeds. A letter written in delicate feminine handwriting beginning with, "My beloved husband." Below, on a smaller plaque, a clinical description. Resisted the forced eviction of Boa Vista Farm. Claimed inherited property rights. Attempted contact with authorities. Threat of exposure. Resolution 0823 to 1957. Body never recovered. Maria felt bile rise in her throat. She moved to the next display, and the next, and the next. 17 in total. 17 people whose lives had been interrupted, erased, to protect the interests of the Davallon family. Men, women, even 2 children, 8-year-old twins who had witnessed something they shouldn't have in 1965. Each display was maintained with meticulous care. No dust, no decay. Someone had been coming here regularly to preserve these, what? Evidence? Trophies? Memorials? In the center of the room stood a stainless steel table with a thick box of files. Maria approached on trembling legs and opened it. Reports. Hundreds of pages of detailed reports about each case, who the people were, why they were considered threats, how they were handled, where the bodies were disposed of. Lists of those who had been paid to stay silent, corrupt police officers, bought judges, threatened journalists, and at the bottom of the box a diary, different from the rest, bound in dark blue leather, embossed in gold with the initials ASD, Amelia Sophia d'Avalon. Maria picked it up with reverent dread, opened to the first page, dated 1983. Today I discovered the basement. Father has been dead for 3 years, and I finally had the courage to open the door he always kept locked. I wish I hadn't. I wish I could unlearn what I know now, but I can't. And now I have a choice: destroy this evidence and live with the guilt of protecting monstrous crimes, or expose it and destroy everything Father built, everything I inherited. I am a coward. I choose silence. But I will keep the records. If someday I find the courage, or if something happens to me, let the truth be known. These people deserve that. Maria turned the pages, the entries skipping years. 1987, 1993, 2001, each one documenting Amelia's inner war, her growing guilt, her attempts at redemption, the charitable foundations she created, the hospitals she funded, the scholarships in the names of some victims, using false identities, of course, but there were darker confessions too. In 1995, an environmental activist investigating pollution from a d'Avalon factory died in a car accident. In 2003, a journalist who asked inconvenient questions about the family's past was found dead in an apparent suicide. I didn't order it, Amelia wrote after the 2003 incident, but I didn't stop it. I knew what the company lawyers would do. I knew how problems were traditionally resolved, and I stayed silent. What makes me different from my father? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The final entries were from the months before her death. The cancer is my punishment, I believe that, and I accept it. But before I go, I must make sure these people are not forgotten. Maria is good, pure. She will do what I never had the courage to do. She will expose everything. Or perhaps she won't. Perhaps she too will choose wealth and silence. I cannot blame her if she does. The temptation is too great. But I hope, God, how I hope, she is stronger than I was. Maria closed the diary, tears sliding silently down her face. Now she understood. She understood Amelia's plea for forgiveness. She understood why the inheritance came with such unbearable weight. Amelia hadn't given her just wealth. She had given her an impossible burden, to deliver justice for 17 murdered souls, for decades of hidden crimes, for an empire built on blood and terror. But how? How could a 58-year-old maid with no formal education or real power stand against one of the wealthiest and most influential families in the region? Bernardo and the other d'Avalons had lawyers, judges in their pockets, connections Maria couldn't even imagine. If she exposed it all, she would be destroyed, branded as insane, as an opportunist trying to tarnish the memory of a generous woman. The files would be dismissed as forgeries. And even if they believed her, even if the truth came out, Maria would lose everything. The inheritance would be contested, seized. She'd be left with nothing. She could simply close the room, seal the basement again, burn the files if necessary, live comfortably on Amelia's money, do quiet charity like she had, and let the dead rest. No one would know, no one would judge her, except herself. Maria looked around at the displays, at the faces in the photographs, Rosa Mendez with her baby, the smiling twins, a middle-aged man with carpenter's tools beside him, probably a builder who knew too much about some irregularity. People, human beings with lives, families, dreams, erased as if they had never existed. And then Maria remembered something Amelia had once said years ago when they discussed a corruption case in the news. Evil triumphs, Amelia had murmured, staring out the window. Not when bad people do bad things, but when good people choose to do nothing. At the time, Maria hadn't understood why those words had been spoken with such bitterness. Now she did. She closed the box of files, turned off the lights, left that room of horrors, carrying only Amelia's diary. She climbed the basement stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. When she reached the main corridor, the clock read 2 in the morning. Maria didn't sleep that night. She sat in Amelia's library, the diary open on her lap, and waited for dawn. When the first pale pink light began to color the sky, she made her decision. She would not be silent. She would not be complicit. Amelia had chosen cowardice and lived with that weight until her death. Maria would choose differently. She would expose everything and let the consequences come. Maria spent the next 3 days photographing every document, every object, every plaque in that chamber of horrors. Her cell phone worked non-stop, capturing evidence. She wasn't yet sure what she would do with it, but she instinctively understood she needed copies. Lots of copies. On the 4th day, while organizing the photos into digital folders in the library, the doorbell rang. Maria froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Since the funeral, she'd avoided contact with the outside world, needing time to process everything. Reluctantly, she went to the door. Through the peephole, she saw a boy. He couldn't be more than 12, thin, with messy brown hair and a worn school backpack. She opened the door a crack. Yes? The boy looked at her with huge green eyes, nervous. Are you Maria? The one who inherited Mrs. Amelia's house? I am. Why? He swallowed hard, glancing around as if afraid of being seen. I need to talk to you. It's about Mrs. Amelia. It's about things she told me. Maria felt a chill. How did you know her? Can I come in, please? I don't want to talk out here. Against all her self-preservation instincts, Maria opened the door. The boy slipped inside quickly, and she noticed he had a slight limp in his left leg. In the sitting room, the boy perched on the edge of the sofa, backpack on his lap like a shield. Maria sat across from him, waiting. My name is Lucas, he began. Lucas Mendez Silva. My great-grandmother was Rosa Mendez. Maria felt the blood drain from her veins. Rosa Mendez, the first display in the basement, the woman with the baby. I don't understand, Maria said carefully. If your great-grandmother is Rosa Mendez, then she's dead. I know. She disappeared in 1957. My grandmother was only 2 at the time. Lucas pulled an old yellowed notebook from his backpack. My grandmother died last year. Before she died, she gave me this. She said they were letters her mother wrote, but never sent. Letters about the farm, about the men who came, about the threats. He held the notebook out to Maria. She took it with trembling hands and opened it. The delicate handwriting was the same she had seen on the letter in the display. July 15th, 1957. The Davalon men came back today. They said we have 1 week to leave. But this land is ours. My grandfather bought it legally. We have the documents. I tried to show them, but they tore everything up in front of me. They said papers can be burned, but people who cause trouble disappear. I'm afraid, very afraid. I always knew my great-grandmother didn't just walk away, Lucas continued, his voice steady despite watery eyes. My grandmother told me stories, how the farm was taken, how the body was never found, how the Davalon family kept everything. Why are you telling me this? Maria asked gently. Because Mrs. Amelia came to me 6 months ago. Maria leaned forward, surprised. What do you mean? She found me at school. She must have investigated, figured out who we were. She cried a lot, apologized in the name of her family, said she couldn't return what was stolen, but she wanted me to know the truth. Lucas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She gave me money, a lot of money for my treatment. Treatment? I was born with a problem in my leg. I needed surgery, but my mum couldn't afford it. Mrs. Amelia paid for everything. The hospital, the doctors, the physical therapy. She said it was the least she could do. Maria felt tears sting. Amelia had tried in her broken way to make some reparation. She made me promise one thing, Lucas went on. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd come here, that I'd tell the person who inherited the house about my great-grandmother. She said, the truth needs witnesses. It needs voices. Lucas, Maria said softly, do you understand what you're saying, what it means to accuse one of the most powerful families around here? I do. My mum doesn't know I'm here. She'd be terrified, but I promised. He met her eyes with a determination far beyond his 12 years. Mrs. Amelia said there would be proof, that you'd find it, and that you'd need someone to testify. Someone who still carries the blood of the victims. Maria was silent for a long moment. Then she made a decision. Lucas, I'm going to show you something. But first you need to understand what you're about to see is disturbing. It's about your great-grandmother, about what happened to her. Are you sure you want to know? The boy nodded, jaw set. Maria led him to the basement. They went down the stairs together, her holding his small, cold hand. When they reached the preserved room, she guided him to the first display. Lucas froze before the case, staring at the photograph of Rosa Mendez. "That's her," he whispered. "My grandmother had a copy of this photo. It's her." He read the plaque, read the documents on display, and when he reached the clinical description of what happened, resolution 08/23/1957, body never recovered, he fell apart. Maria held him as he cried, his thin body shaking with sobs. She said nothing. What could she say? That it was horrible. He already knew. That she was sorry. It wouldn't change anything. When the tears finally subsided, Lucas pulled away, wiping his face. "The others?" he asked, looking around. "All these other displays? 17 people in all killed or made to disappear to protect the interests of the d'Avalon family between 1953 and 2003. 2003, but that's recent." "Yes, the crimes didn't stop with Amelia's father." Lucas walked slowly around the room, reading each plaque, looking at each face. When he finished, he returned to Maria. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to expose everything. I'll go to the authorities, the press, anyone who will listen. These people deserve justice. Their families deserve to know what happened. And your inheritance? I'll lose it. I'll probably be sued, defamed, maybe even jailed for slander if they can't prove the documents are real. But," Maria looked around that macabre room, "I can't live with this money. Not after knowing where it came from." Lucas nodded slowly. "My mom says doing the right thing often costs a lot. She works 3 jobs to raise me alone. Says she could make easier choices, but then she couldn't look herself in the mirror. Your mother is wise. You're going to need help," Lucas said suddenly. "The d'Avalons will fight with everything they have. They'll try to make you look crazy. They'll say you forged everything." "I know. Then you need people who believe you. You need the families of the other victims. You need allies." Maria looked at that 12-year-old boy, wounded by history but not broken by it, and saw what Amelia must have seen. Courage. "Would you help me?" she asked. "I don't want to put you in danger, but—" "My great-grandmother has no grave," Lucas interrupted. "No headstone, nothing. As if she never existed. If I can change that, if I can make sure her name is remembered, yes, I'll help." Maria held out her hand. "Then we're allies." Lucas gripped her hand with surprising strength. Allies. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans. Lucas had a sharp mind and an instinctive grasp of how things worked. He suggested starting with the other families, finding descendants who might have similar stories. "People talk," he said. "My grandmother always did. The families never forgot, even if they never had proof. If you bring them all together, we create a voice that can't be ignored," Maria finished. When Lucas left, dusk already falling, Maria felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. It wouldn't be easy. It would probably be the hardest thing she had ever done, but she wouldn't be alone. And perhaps, just perhaps, Amelia had planned this from the start, not just to expose the crimes, but to build a network of people touched by the tragedy, united in the pursuit of justice. Maria went back to the basement one last time that night. She stopped in front of Rosa Mendez's display. "Your great-grandson is remarkable," she said aloud, feeling only slightly foolish speaking to the dead. "He's going to make sure you're remembered. I promise." The basement's silence didn't answer, but somehow Maria felt she had been heard. Bernardo d'Avalon was not a patient man. 2 weeks after his aunt's funeral, he was determined to find something, anything, that would invalidate that absurd will. A maid inheriting everything? It was humiliating. It was wrong. It was unacceptable. He hired private investigators, paid informants, tried to bribe Dr. Vasconcelos to discover irregularities in the will. Nothing worked. Amelia had been far too meticulous, but Bernardo had another idea. If he couldn't prove the will was invalid, perhaps he could prove that Maria was unworthy, that she had manipulated, stolen from, or committed some crime that would disqualify her from the inheritance. In the 3rd week, he decided to act directly. Maria was at the market when it happened. She had left the mansion for the first time since the funeral, desperately needing fresh food and, honestly, a moment away from those walls heavy with secrets. While she was choosing tomatoes, 3 men entered the d'Avalon mansion. They weren't common thieves. They were professionals hired by Bernardo with specific instructions. Find anything compromising about Maria. Correspondence, financial documents, diaries, anything that could be used against her. What Bernardo hadn't counted on was Lucas. The boy had developed the habit of stopping by the mansion after school. Maria welcomed him with cookies and tea, and they worked together, identifying families of the other victims. Lucas had become not just an ally, but something like a grandson to Maria. That afternoon, Lucas was arriving for his daily visit when he saw the side door of the mansion, the one leading to the laundry room, slightly ajar. He knew Maria was meticulous about security. She always locked everything. Instinctively, Lucas knew something was wrong. He pulled his phone from his pocket, the cheap device his mother had given him for emergencies, and started recording. Then, carefully, he approached the house. Voices came from inside. Male, rough. "Sweep everything," one said. "Bernardo wants anything we can use. Bank statements, letters, whatever. And the basement." He said the old lady had a basement that was always locked. "If you find the key, take a look. But fast. The little maid could come back any minute." Lucas felt his heart race. The basement. They couldn't reach the basement. They couldn't discover that before Maria was ready to reveal it. Before they had enough allies. He did the only thing he could think of. He called the police. "Emergency services, what's your emergency?" the operator answered. "There are people breaking into a house," Lucas whispered, keeping the phone close to his face as he continued recording. "The Davalon Mansion, Avenida dos Pinheiros, 1842. 3 men, they went in without permission. Are you in the house now? I'm outside. Please, come quickly." While he waited, Lucas kept recording. He captured audio of the men ransacking rooms, breaking drawer locks, talking casually about the job Bernardo had hired them to do. "Find anything?" a voice asked. "Just the inheritance papers, all legit, legal. This Maria is way too clean. Boring. Bernardo won't like that. He was hoping to find dirt. Maybe there's something in the basement. I'll look for the key." Through the window, Lucas saw one of the men going upstairs, heading toward Amelia's bedroom, where Maria kept the jewelry box with the basement key. Panic overtook him. Without thinking, Lucas knocked on the window. The 3 men froze. One ran to the window, saw the boy, and immediately shouted to the others, "There's a kid here. Let's go." They sprinted toward the side exit, but it was too late. Sirens could be heard in the distance, growing louder by the second. The men hesitated, caught between fleeing and being caught or trying to grab the witness. The decision was made when 2 patrol cars turned the corner, blue and red lights slicing through the afternoon air. All 3 were detained trying to jump the back wall. Maria came home to find the street full of police cars. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw Lucas, wrapped in a blanket, sitting on the curb as he gave a statement to a policewoman. "Lucas!" She ran to him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he assured her, though he was pale. "But there were people trying to break into your house." The officer in charge, a middle-aged sergeant named Rodriguez, explained the situation. "The boy called to report a break-in. When we arrived, we caught 3 men in the act. They had burglary tools, were clearly looking for something. But who? They didn't want to talk at first," the sergeant continued, "but the boy here is sharp. He managed to record audio of them talking, including repeatedly mentioning the name Bernardo and references to you, Ms. Maria." Maria felt anger boil in her veins. "Bernardo Davalon. We'll need to investigate," the sergeant said carefully. "But if it's confirmed that he hired these people to invade your property, well, that's a serious crime, regardless of a person's last name." Lucas tugged at Maria's sleeve, drawing her close. "They wanted to get to the basement," he whispered, low enough only she could hear. "They were looking for the key." Maria felt a chill. If those men had found what was in the basement, Bernardo would have full knowledge of his family's crimes and control over how and when that information was used. He could destroy everything, or worse, use the evidence to blackmail Maria into silence. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Maria said, making a sudden decision, "there's something I need to show you. Something that was kept in this house. Something that explains why someone would be so desperate to break in." The sergeant frowned. "What are you talking about, ma'am?" "Evidence. Evidence of crimes committed for decades by the Davalon family. Crimes that were hidden, but which the late Amelia Davalon documented meticulously." Maria drew a breath. "Crimes that include murder." Silence fell. The officers looked at her as if she had lost her mind. Maria knew how it sounded. A newly wealthy maid accusing one of the region's most powerful families of murder. It sounded exactly like the sort of thing Bernardo would expect her to say, something he could use to paint her as unhinged. But she had proof, and now she had an audience. "Sergeant," she continued, her voice steady despite the fear, "if you'll allow me, I'd like to show you what's in this house's basement, but I need you to bring reinforcements, and maybe a prosecutor, because what you're about to see will change a lot. Rodriguez exchanged looks with the other officers. He could simply dismiss her as a hysterical woman, but there was something in her voice, an unshakable certainty that made him hesitate. "All right," he said at last. "I'll call my superior. But Miss Maria, I truly hope you're not wasting our time. Serious accusations require serious evidence." "I know," Maria replied, "and I have it." An hour later, the mansion was full of police. Lieutenant Colonel Araujo, an austere man in his early 50s, had arrived personally. With him came prosecutor Dr. Helena Cardoso, a woman known for her zero tolerance toward corruption cases. Maria led them to the basement. With each step they descended, she could feel the tension mounting. Lucas had insisted on coming too, and she hadn't had the heart to refuse him. After all, he had made this moment possible. When they reached the preserved room, Maria opened the door. The silence was deafening. Dr. Cardoso walked slowly among the displays, her face pale but controlled. She read each plaque, examined each document on display. Lieutenant Colonel Araujo followed, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to horror. "My God," he murmured when he reached the display of the twins. "These are children." "They witnessed a murder in 1965, Maria explained, her voice hoarse. "They were silenced. They were 8. Dr. Cardoso opened the box of files in the center of the room. She began to read, her hands trembling as she turned page after page. When she reached Amelia's diary, she read in silence for long minutes. Finally, she looked at Maria. "Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what it means to expose this?" "I do. The Davallon family has unlimited resources. Lawyers who can drag this through the courts for decades, contacts at every level of government. They'll try to destroy you." "I know," Maria repeated. "But these people," she gestured to the displays around them, "have no voice anymore. Someone has to speak for them." "She's not alone," Lucas said suddenly, his thin voice firm. "My great-grandmother is here, Rosa Mendes, and I will testify." Dr. Cardoso looked at the boy, then at Maria, and something in her expression hardened into resolve. "All right, we're going to do this, but we have to do it right. Every document here needs to be catalogued, authenticated, preserved as evidence. I'll need to bring in experts, forensic photographers, historical documentation specialists." "How long will it take?" the lieutenant colonel asked. "Weeks, maybe months to process everything completely. Bernardo Davallon will know something's happening," Rodriguez pointed out. "The men we arrested will make calls. Lawyers will show up." "Let them come," Dr. Cardoso said coolly. "I want them to know. I want them to know that every move they make against Maria, every threat, every attempt at intimidation, will be treated as obstruction of justice. And this time," she looked around that macabre room, "this time they won't be able to cover it up." She was right about one thing. Bernardo found out quickly. That night, when Maria finally managed to lie down, with 2 officers standing guard on the property, her phone rang. "Private number," she answered. "Hello? You've made a terrible mistake." Bernardo's voice was hoarse with barely contained rage. "You think you can destroy me, destroy my family. We are Davallon. We've survived wars, revolutions, crises. We'll survive you." "Bernardo," Maria said calmly, "I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just giving a voice to the people your family silenced. That bitch of an aunt manipulated you, filled your head with lies. They weren't lies. They're documents. Photographs. Physical proof your family kept as, what? Trophies? Insurance? Documents can be forged. You're a greedy maid who invented a story to justify stealing my inheritance." "Then why did you send men to break into my house?" Maria shot back. "If there's nothing to hide, why were you so desperate to find something?" Silence on the other end. Then, lower, more dangerous. "You'll regret this. I promise." The call ended. Maria stayed awake the rest of the night, listening to every sound in the mansion, every creak. But it wasn't fear that kept her eyes open. It was determination. Bernardo had made the fatal mistake Amelia had predicted in her diary. Arrogance. He was so certain of his impunity, so convinced the Davallon name protected him from any consequence, that he acted recklessly, and in doing so, he had given Maria exactly what she needed, a legitimate reason for the authorities to investigate the family. Bernardo's mistake would be the salvation of those 17 silenced souls, and Maria would make sure each one finally found justice. The next 2 months were an avalanche of activity that completely transformed Maria's life. The Davalon mansion was turned into a criminal investigation scene. Forensic experts worked in the basement daily, cataloguing every item, photographing each document, authenticating every piece of evidence. Dr. Helena Cardoso assembled a task force dedicated solely to the case. Historians were brought in to verify the authenticity of the documents. Handwriting experts confirmed the diaries were indeed written by Augusto and Amelia Davalon. Laboratories dated the paper and inks, confirming nothing had been forged or tampered with. And then, on a cold Thursday morning, the news exploded. Empire built on blood. Documents revealed decades of Davalon family crimes. The headline dominated every newspaper. Social media erupted. TV programs devoted hours to the case. And at the center of it all was Maria, the maid who had become the guardian of terrible secrets. The interviews were brutal. "Ms. Maria," a reporter asked during a press conference, "some critics suggest you're doing this out of revenge, that you're trying to destroy the Davalon family because they contested your inheritance. What do you say to that?" Maria looked straight into the camera. "I would have preferred never to know these things. I would have preferred to live my life in peace with the good memories I had of Amelia Davalon. But when you discover that the fortune you inherited was built on the suffering of innocent people, you have a choice. Live a lie or face the truth. I chose the truth. But aren't you benefiting financially from these accusations?" "On the contrary," Dr. Cardoso interjected. "Maria voluntarily donated the entire inheritance to a fund that will be distributed among the victims' families and human rights organizations. She kept only the mansion, which will be turned into a memorial. She gains nothing from this. In fact, she lost everything." The silence that followed was eloquent, but the Davalons didn't stay quiet. Bernardo hired the most expensive lawyers and the most effective crisis managers. The narrative they tried to construct was that Amelia had lost her mind in her final years, suffered from undiagnosed dementia, and that Maria had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman to implant false memories. "My aunt was a kind woman but ill," Bernardo declared in a TV interview. His eyes moist with tears Maria knew were fake. "This woman," he spat the pronoun with contempt, "manipulated an elderly, vulnerable lady and is now defaming our family with elaborate lies." Then Lucas stepped forward. The 12-year-old boy, small and nervous but with a steady voice, gave his own interview. He held a photograph of Rosa Mendez, his great-grandmother, and told his story. How generations of his family had grown up knowing something terrible had happened, but unable to prove it. How Amelia had sought him out, crying, asking for forgiveness. "Ms. Amelia wasn't crazy," Lucas said, looking straight into the camera. "She was guilty, and she was right to feel guilty. My great-grandmother was murdered because she stood in the way of the Davalon family's profits, and for 70 years, no one paid for it." Lucas's appearance changed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't just about abstract documents and historical crimes. It was about a boy looking at the photo of a great-grandmother he never knew, stolen from him by greed. Then other voices began to emerge. The granddaughter of one of the murdered carpenters, the nephew of one of the missing women, people who had grown up with stories of relatives who simply went away or had accidents at convenient moments for Davalon interests. One by one, these families came forward, and together they created a chorus that could not be ignored. The turning point came when a former Davalon Corporation employee, now retired with nothing to lose, gave a bombshell statement. He confirmed that illegal practices had continued until recently, that bribes were routine, that threats were standard negotiating tools. "I worked for them for 30 years, the man, identified only as Fernando M., declared. "I saw things, heard conversations. I never had proof and I was too afraid to speak. But now that the evidence is out there, I can confirm. Everything being said is true. The Davalons believe they are above the law. They always have." The pressure became unbearable. Shareholders began distancing themselves from Davalon companies. Government contracts were suspended, pending investigation. Charities returned donations, unwilling to be associated with the name. And then came the arrest. Bernardo Davalon was formally charged with breaking and entering, conspiracy to obstruct justice and, based on new documents that surfaced during the investigation, tax fraud and bribery. It wasn't murder. It wasn't the crimes of his grandfather and aunt, but it was enough to jail him. Maria watched the arrest on television. She saw Bernardo escorted in handcuffs, his face red with rage and humiliation. She felt no satisfaction, only a deep, persistent sadness. That night she returned to the basement. The investigation was over. The experts had left, taking copies of everything but leaving the originals for the planned memorial. Maria walked among the displays, now lit by professional lighting the forensics team had installed. Every face watched her, not with accusation, she felt, but with something that might be relief. "Your stories have been told," she said aloud, feeling less ridiculous than the first time. "The world knows what happened to you. I can't bring you back. I can't undo what was done, but I've made sure you were not forgotten." She stopped in front of Rosa Mendes's display. The photograph of the young woman with her baby looked different now, less like a silenced ghost and more like a real person who had lived, loved, fought. "Your great-grandson is incredible," Maria said softly. "He has your courage." A sound behind her made her turn. Lucas was at the top of the stairs, watching. "My mom said I could come say goodbye," he explained, descending slowly. "We're moving. The financial compensation, it's enough for us to start over somewhere else. Somewhere without bad memories." "That's good," Maria said sincerely. "You deserve a fresh start." Lucas walked up to her, stopping before his great-grandmother's display. "Do you think she would be proud of me?" "I'm absolutely certain of it." They stood in silence for a moment, two survivors of a story neither had asked to be part of. "What will you do now?" Lucas asked. "I'm going to turn this place into the memorial Amelia wanted. A place where people can come to learn what happens when power goes unchecked, when greed isn't restrained. A place of remembrance and warning." Maria sighed. "And then, I don't know, maybe travel, maybe find some peace somewhere." "You're a hero," Lucas said suddenly. "People are saying it. You sacrificed everything to do the right thing." "I'm not a hero," Maria corrected gently. "I just did what should have been done a long time ago. If there are heroes here, it's you." A 12-year-old boy who had the courage to speak when adults stayed silent for decades. Lucas blushed but smiled. "Can we be heroes together?" "We can," Maria agreed, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "We definitely can." As they climbed the basement stairs one last time together, Maria looked back once. The lights illuminated the displays, and for a moment, just a moment, she could have sworn she saw shadows moving among them, not threatening, but peaceful. As if finally, after decades, those souls could rest. The truth had come to light, and with it a small measure of justice. It wasn't perfect. It didn't bring anyone back, but it was something. And sometimes, Maria realized, something is all we can reach. 6 months after the public explosion of the Davalon case, Maria sat in what had once been Amelia's library, now transformed into the office of the Memorial of the Silenced Victims, the official name chosen after extensive consultation with the affected families. The mansion's transformation had been complex. Architects specialized in memorial spaces worked to preserve the historic character of the house while making it accessible to the public. The basement had been carefully converted into a permanent exhibition, each display now accompanied by detailed information about the victims, not just how they died, but how they lived. "Rosa Mendes," read the new expanded plaque, "was known for her generosity. Neighbors remembered that she always had extra food for anyone in need. She loved to sing while she worked in her garden. She dreamed that her son might study and have opportunities she never had." Each victim now had a full story, not just a death date. Maria had worked tirelessly with the families, collecting memories, photographs, anecdotes. They deserved to be remembered as whole people, not just as victims. The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. It was Dr. Helena Cardoso. "Good morning, Maria. I have news about Bernardo's case." "He accepted a deal?" Maria asked. Rumors had circulated for weeks that the defense was negotiating. "Yes, 8 years in prison, no possibility of reduction, plus substantial fines and a permanent ban from holding any position in any Diavalon company. The companies themselves will have to be completely restructured under government supervision." Maria closed her eyes, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "And the other cases? The historical crimes? Officially, they're all being closed due to the death of the perpetrators, but not before being fully documented and acknowledged by the state. There will be an official apology to the families, and a permanent reparations fund has been established." "That's more than we hoped for." "It's what you all deserved," Helena corrected her. "Maria, what you did changed things, not just for those 17 families, but for the entire system. We're now reviewing hundreds of archived cases of suspicious disappearances linked to land disputes and economic power. Your courage opened doors." After hanging up, Maria sat in silence, processing. She had lost the fortune, yes, but she had gained something money could never buy: purpose. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Julia, the young historian Maria had hired as curator of the memorial, entered with a smile. "Maria, you need to see this." She followed Julia to the main hall where a group of visitors had gathered. But they weren't ordinary tourists. They were university students, part of a course on social justice and corporate responsibility. The professor, a middle-aged man with round glasses, was explaining, "This place represents something crucial, the idea that truth always finds a way. Amelia d'Avalon didn't have the courage to expose the crimes while alive, but she created the conditions for them to be revealed after her death. And Maria Suarez, a woman with no power or privilege, chose to do the right thing, even knowing the price she would pay." The students were taking frantic notes. One raised their hand. "Is it true she donated the entire inheritance?" 73 million, the professor confirmed, distributed among the victims' families and human rights organizations. She kept only this property to create the memorial. "But how does she live now?" another student asked, genuinely concerned. Maria decided to answer herself, stepping out from the shadows where she'd been watching. "I live modestly but comfortably. I earn a small salary as the memorial's administrator. I have a simple apartment in the city. I don't need much." The students recognized her instantly, some with reverence, others with curiosity. The professor smiled. "What luck we have. Ms. Maria, could you speak to my students about your decision? What motivated you?" Maria hesitated, still uncomfortable with public attention. But then she thought of Rosa, the twins, all those silenced voices. "I'm not special," she began. "I'm just someone who was given an impossible choice. I could have been rich by keeping secrets or poor by telling the truth, but I realized something. Money buys comfort, not peace. I could never have peace knowing I was living with blood on my hands, even if it wasn't my own." "But weren't you afraid?" a student asked. "The d'Avalons were so powerful." "I was very afraid. I still am sometimes. But another thing I learned, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing, despite the fear. And I wasn't alone. I had allies. I had Lucas, the boy who helped expose everything," a student asked excitedly. "How is he?" Maria smiled genuinely. "Well, very well. He and his mother moved to another city, where he's thriving in school. We stay in touch regularly. He calls me every week to tell me about his studies. He wants to be a human rights lawyer when he grows up." "Inspired by you?" "Inspired by his great-grandmother," Maria corrected. "By all the people who never had a chance to fight for justice. He wants to be their voice." She spent the next hour answering questions, guiding them through the memorial, telling stories, not the horrific parts, those were documented for anyone to study, but the human ones. How Rosa liked to sing, how one carpenter carved wooden toys for village children, how one woman baked cakes so delicious that people came from far away to buy them. "Crimes take lives," Maria explained as they walked through the memorial. "But what's often lost are the stories, who these people were, what they loved, what they dreamed of. Our work here isn't just to remember that they died, but that they lived." When the students finally left, Maria was exhausted but content. Julia brought coffee, and they sat on the veranda, the same one where Amelia used to weep silently. "You're good at this," Julia said. "Teaching, sharing. Have you thought about writing a book?" "A publisher approached me," Maria admitted, "but I'm not sure I'm ready. It feels presumptuous somehow, like I'd be trying to make myself the hero of a story that isn't about me." "It's about you too," Julia said gently. "You're part of this story. And honestly, people need to know that ordinary individuals can make extraordinary differences. It's easy to believe only powerful or special people can change the world, but you proved that's not true." Maria considered this. Maybe Julia was right. Maybe her story, a maid who chose truth over comfort, could inspire others to make similar choices in their own lives. "I'll think about it," she promised. That night, Maria did something she hadn't done in months. She went back to the basement. Not for work, not to guide visitors, but alone. She sat on the floor in the center of the room, surrounded by the displays. From her pocket, she took a letter, the last one Amelia had written, found only recently among her personal belongings. "Dear Maria, if you're reading this, you made the choice I couldn't make. You exposed the truth. Part of me hopes you chose silence, because I know the price truth demands. But the greater part, the better part of me, hopes you were brave. I spent my life accumulating wealth, but died poor in spirit. You may be poor in money, but you will be rich in integrity. And in the end, dear Maria, Integrity is the only treasure we take with us. Thank you for being my friend when I didn't deserve friendship. Thank you for being my conscience when I had lost my own. Thank you for showing me, even if too late, what it means to live with honor. With love and eternal gratitude, Amelia. Maria folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. You weren't beyond redemption, she whispered to Amelia's memory. In the end, you made the right choice. You just made it through me. She looked around at the displays, at the faces she now knew so well. Rest, she said softly. Your stories have been told. Your lives have been honored. You haven't been forgotten. And there, in the silence of the basement that was no longer a place of horror but of remembrance, Maria finally felt she had fulfilled her promise. The truth was free. The victims had a voice. And although perfect justice was impossible, a measure of justice had been achieved. It was enough. 2 years later, spring had arrived, painting the mansion's gardens, now officially the memorial of the silenced victims and center for the study of historical justice, with bright flowers. Maria, now 60, stood in the garden with pruning shears, tending the rose bushes Amelia had loved so much. Some things never changed. She still found peace in manual work, in touching the soil, in the contemplative silence of gardening. "Donna Maria!" a familiar voice called. She turned, and her face lit up. Lucas, now 14 and surprisingly taller, was running along the stone path. He'd grown a lot, gained muscle from continuous physical therapy, and his limp was now almost imperceptible. "Lucas, I didn't know you were coming today." "Surprise!" he shouted, hugging her tight. "School break, Mum said we could spend a week here." Lucas's mother, Carmen, followed more slowly, carrying a suitcase. Maria hugged her as well. Over the last 2 years, Carmen had become not just an ally, but a true friend. "The guest house is ready," Maria assured her. "Julia set everything up yesterday." "Actually," Lucas said, suddenly shy, "there's another reason we're here. Something special is happening tomorrow, and we wanted you to know first." "What is it?" Carmen smiled, pulling an official envelope from her pocket. "The government finally approved it. They're going to build a public monument for all victims of violence related to land disputes in recent decades, and they're naming a square after Rosa Mendez." Tears burned in Maria's eyes. "Oh, Carmen, Lucas, that's wonderful." "It wouldn't have happened without you," Carmen said firmly. "Without the memorial, without exposing the case, these other stories would never have come to light. You started something bigger than you imagined." They spent the rest of the day catching up. Lucas talked about school, his friends, the debate club he'd joined. "We won the regional championship," he said proudly. "I argued restorative justice versus punitive justice." "And which side did you defend?" Maria asked, curious. "Restorative, because it's not just about punishing the wrongdoer, but about healing the harmed, like what you did here." Pride swelled in Maria's chest. That boy, no, young man, had matured so much, yet kept his core kindness. That evening at dinner, Julia joined them with news of her own. "Maria, I got a call today. An American university wants to make a documentary about the memorial, and they'd like you to serve as a visiting academic consultant for a semester." "Me?" Maria nearly dropped her fork. "But I don't have formal education, Julia. I barely finished high school." "You have something better than diplomas, lived experience and moral wisdom," Julia replied. "They want you to teach about civic courage, making hard choices, how ordinary people can challenge power structures." "You should accept," Lucas said immediately. "Donna Maria, you have so much to teach." "I don't know." Maria hesitated, but something stirred in her heart. Maybe it was time to broaden her reach, to share these lessons beyond the memorial's walls. "Think about it," Julia suggested. "You have time." The next morning, they went together to the site where the new monument would be erected. A downtown square, currently just an empty lot, but soon to be a space for memory and reflection. A small group was already gathered, families of other victims, government representatives, a few journalists. When Maria arrived, spontaneous applause broke out. She blushed, waving shyly. She still wasn't used to public recognition. The mayor gave a speech about justice and memory. Dr. Helena Cardoso, now promoted to Attorney General, spoke about how the Davallon case had transformed the way historical crimes were investigated. And then, to Maria's surprise, Lucas was called to the microphone. The boy, young man, walked with a confidence he hadn't had 2 years before. His voice, though still changing, was steady. "My name is Lucas Mendez Silva. My great-grandmother, Rosa Mendez, was murdered in 1957 because she stood in the way of powerful people's profit. For 70 years, her death was a mystery to our family, a hole that could never be filled. He paused, looking at Maria. But then a courageous woman decided that silence was no longer acceptable. Maria Suarez could have lived rich and comfortable by keeping secrets. Instead, she chose truth. She chose justice. She chose to honor people she never knew because it was the right thing to do. Lucas held up the photo of Rosa he always carried. Today, my great-grandmother will have a square named after her. Children will play here. People will rest here. And when they ask who Rosa Mendez was, they'll learn about a strong woman who fought for her rights, who loved her family, who deserved to live but had her life stolen. She won't be forgotten. And this remembrance, this recognition, is thanks to Donna Maria. He turned directly to her. When I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to have the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. You are my hero, Donna Maria. Thank you for giving my great-grandmother her dignity back, for giving all of us our dignity back. Tears were streaming freely down Maria's face now. She didn't try to hide them. After the ceremony, as people dispersed, an elderly man approached her. He had to be at least 80, bent with age but with clear, alert eyes. Ms. Maria? His voice was weak but steady. My name is Alberto Santos. My father disappeared in 1971. We always suspected the Davallon family, but we never had proof. Maria remembered. Alberto Santos was in the files, a lawyer preparing a lawsuit against a Davallon company for labor violations. When the memorial opened, Alberto continued, I finally found answers. I learned what happened to my father. Where he's buried, well, approximately. That gave me closure I'd searched for over 50 years. He took a small box from his pocket. This belonged to my father, a pocket watch he loved. I want you to have it, for the memorial. So that part of him is there, being remembered. Maria took the box reverently and opened it. The watch was simple but well kept, with an inscription inside the lid, for Alberto Sr. with love. Time passes, love remains. It will be cared for with honor, Maria promised, and your father's story will be told with dignity. Alberto nodded, tears in his aged eyes. Thank you. Thank you for caring about people the world forgot. As he walked away, Carmen came over, placing a hand on Maria's shoulder. Are you okay? I am, Maria answered honestly. I'm more than okay. I'm complete. That night, back at the memorial, Maria made her decision. She called Julia. About the American University, she said. I want to accept, but on one condition. Lucas comes with me. Maria, he still has school. Then he studies there for a semester. It'll be educational in ways a normal classroom can't be, and Maria drew a breath. I'd like to propose something, officially. What? I want to adopt Lucas, not to replace Carmen, she's a wonderful mother, but legally, I want him to be my heir. When I die, this memorial, everything I've built will be his. He is the next generation, the voice that will carry this legacy forward. Silence on the line. Then Julia's voice, thick with emotion. Maria, that's beautiful. But you need to talk to him and Carmen. I know, I'll talk to them tomorrow. The conversation the next morning was emotional. Carmen cried. Lucas was speechless for a full 5 minutes, which for an eloquent teenager was notable. You want me to be your heir? He finally managed. But why? You could leave everything to charities, because legacy isn't about money, Lucas. It's about values. It's about ensuring the work continues. And I don't know anyone better to carry that torch than you. Maria held his hands. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. Talk to your mother. It's a big responsibility. I don't need to think, Lucas said immediately. Yes, 100 times yes. It would be the greatest honor of my life. Carmen hugged Maria, crying. You've already given us so much. The compensation, your support, your friendship. And now this. You gave me purpose, Maria replied. You gave me a family. Amelia left me money and property. But you gave me something infinitely more valuable, belonging. 3 months later, the legal papers were complete. Lucas Mendez Silva was officially named the legal heir of Maria Suarez and future administrator of the Memorial of the Silenced Victims. The ceremony was small, just close friends, but its meaning was immense. The maid who had inherited from a billionaire now passed that inheritance, transformed from blood-stained wealth into a legacy of justice to the great-grandson of one of the victims. The circle was complete. Dr. Helena Cardoso, present at the ceremony, raised her glass of champagne. A toast to Maria Suarez, who proved that an ordinary person can change the world, to Lucas Mendez Silva, who represents hope and continuity, and to the memory of Amelia Davalon, who in the end chose redemption over comfort, to the victims who finally have a voice, someone added, to the truth that sets us free, said another, to justice, even when it arrives late, Carmen murmured, to the family we choose, Maria concluded, looking at Lucas with a maternal love she'd never imagined feeling. That night, Maria went back to the basement one last time. She'd made it a personal ritual, coming here every few months to renew her promise to the souls remembered there. But this time was different. Lucas was with her. I want you to meet everyone, Maria said, not just as displays in a memorial, but as people. I want to tell you the stories I've gathered, the small details that make each of them real. They spent hours there. Maria speaking, Lucas listening, absorbing. She told him about Rosa and her famous cakes, about the twins who loved to fish, about the carpenter who carved toys, about the teacher who taught poor children for free. They weren't just victims, Lucas said eventually. They were extraordinary people living ordinary lives until something terrible happened. Exactly. And that's what we must never forget. Crimes don't just take lives. They steal futures, dreams, potential. Who knows what these people might have become, how many lives they would have touched. But they touch lives now, Lucas pointed out. Through this memorial, through the stories we tell about them. They inspire people to fight injustice, to value truth, to be brave. Maria smiled. You're going to be amazing at this. Better than me. Not better. Different. Every generation has to find its own voice. Lucas looked around the room. But I'll honor what you built here, Donna Maria. I promise. As they climbed the stairs together, Maria felt a deep peace. Amelia had given her an impossible inheritance. She had turned it into something meaningful, and now she was passing it on, not as a burden but as a privilege. The legacy was no longer about fortune or a mansion. It was about memory, truth, and justice. It was about ensuring silenced voices were finally heard. It was about turning darkness into light. And in Lucas's hands, young, idealistic, determined, that legacy would continue to grow, touching new generations, inspiring new acts of courage. Maria looked back one last time before closing the basement door. The lights bathed the displays softly, and for a moment, just a moment, she could have sworn she saw figures there. Not frightening, but serene, waving, thanking her. Rest in peace, she whispered. You're in good hands now. And then she closed the door, ready for the next chapter. The past had been honored. The future was secured. And in between, in the present, a maid who became a guardian of memories walked side by side with a victim's great-grandson, united not by blood, but by purpose. Family, as Amelia had said, wasn't about blood. It was about choice, about loyalty, about love. And in that truth, Maria finally found her home. The university auditorium was packed. More than 500 people, students, professors, activists, journalists, filled every seat, with many standing in the back. They had all come to hear the guest speaker, Lucas Mendez Silva, now 24, a law graduate with honors and already recognized internationally as a human rights activist, adjusted the microphone. He was no longer the thin, shy boy he had been. He was a man, tall and confident, yet with the same gentle green eyes. Good evening, he began. My name is Lucas Mendez Silva. I'm the director of the Memorial of the Silenced Victims and president of the Rosa Mendez Foundation for Historical Justice. But before anything else, I am the great-grandson of a woman who was murdered because she dared to defend her rights. A photo of Rosa Mendez appeared on the huge screen behind him. This is Rosa Mendez, my great-grandmother. For 70 years, she was just a statistic, a missing person, a closed case. But she was much more than that. She was a mother, a neighbor, a dreamer. And today, thanks to the work of an extraordinary woman, my great-grandmother and 16 others finally have their stories told. The image changed to a photo of Maria, younger on the day the memorial opened. Maria Suarez was 58 when she inherited a fortune. 73 million. A mansion, jewelry, power. She could have lived in luxury for the rest of her life. Instead, she chose truth. She chose justice. And in doing so, she changed not only my life, but the course of history for hundreds of families. Lucas paused, looking at the front row where a woman with completely white hair, 68, yet still bright-eyed and strong-spirited, smiled at him with maternal pride. Maria Suarez, retired from daily duties at the memorial, but still active as a consultant and mentor, gave a discreet wave. Donna Maria taught me that courage doesn't come from physical strength or economic power. It comes from integrity, from the willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for greater principles, Lucas continued. She taught me that one person, just one, can make a monumental difference. That silence in the face of injustice is complicity. That truth, even when painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. He clicked to the next image. The memorial today, expanded, modernized, with thousands of visitors each year. The Memorial of the Silenced Victims now receives more than 50,000 visitors annually. It has become a model for similar memorials in 3 countries. It inspired legislation that facilitates reopening long-closed cases of violence tied to economic power. And most importantly, it restored dignity to people the world had forgotten. More images, plaques with victims' names, families visiting, students learning, remembrance ceremonies. But Maria Suarez's legacy goes beyond a memorial. She proved something fundamental about human nature, that kindness exists, that ordinary people can be extraordinary, that each of us has the power to choose ethics over convenience. Lucas took a breath, emotion evident in his voice. 10 years ago, Maria legally adopted me as her heir, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but because she believed in me, because she saw potential I didn't see in myself. She gave me not just material inheritance, but a moral one. She gave me purpose. The screen shifted to a recent photo of the two of them, embracing in front of the memorial. 3 generations of history connected by choice and love. So today, as we celebrate the memorial's 10th anniversary, I want to say publicly, thank you, Donna Maria. Thank you for teaching me the meaning of courage. Thank you for honoring my great-grandmother when the world had forgotten her. Thank you for showing me that family isn't about blood, but about whom we choose to love and support. The audience erupted in applause. Maria, trying to be discreet, dabbed at tears with an embroidered handkerchief, the same one Amelia had given her decades earlier, now worn but precious. After the talk, as people crowded around Lucas for autographs and photos, Maria waited patiently off to the side. A young student, no more than 19, approached timidly. Mrs. Suarez, may I speak with you for a moment? Of course, dear. I just wanted to say that your story changed my life. I come from a poor family and thought I could never make a difference in the world, but you showed me I don't need money or power to have an impact. I just need the courage to do what's right. Maria held the young woman's hands. And you do have that courage. I see it in your eyes. Use it well. The student walked away beaming, and Maria found herself wondering how many other lives had been touched, how many seeds of courage had been planted. Ready to head home? Lucas appeared at her side, finally free of the crowd. Ready. In the car, as they drove back to the city where the memorial was located, they chatted comfortably about everything and nothing. Lucas talked about his new project, a documentary on restorative justice. Maria shared updates about the memorial garden. The rose bushes were especially beautiful this year. You know, Lucas said eventually, sometimes I still can't believe how my life changed. If those men hadn't tried to break into the house, if I hadn't been there that day. But you were, Maria gently interrupted. And that wasn't a coincidence. It was fate. Amelia planned everything carefully, even the parts that looked like chance. You think she knew that Bernardo would try something? I think she knew her nephews well enough to predict it, and she left clues, created circumstances to ensure the truth would surface no matter what. Lucas drove in silence for a moment. Did you forgive her, Amelia, for all those years of silence? Maria considered carefully. I did, because she did the only thing she could in the end. She made sure the truth outlived her. It wasn't brave in the ideal way, but it was brave in the way she was capable of being, and that counts. They arrived at the memorial as the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The mansion, the very one where Maria had been interviewed 45 years earlier, glowed golden in the evening light. I'm just going to check the basement quickly, Lucas said. The new interactive installation was supposed to be finished today. I'll go with you. They descended the stairs together, now wide, well-lit, accessible, nothing like the frightening descent of that first night. The basement had been completely transformed, still reverent, still a memorial, but also educational and even hopeful. The 17 displays remained, now complemented by interactive stations where visitors could learn about justice, human rights, how to recognize and confront abuse of power. There was a section dedicated to silent heroes, ordinary people who made courageous choices against injustice. Maria stopped before Rosa Mendez' display, as she always did. The photo had been professionally restored, and now the young Rosa smiled vibrantly, full of life. "He'd make you so proud," Maria murmured. "Your great-grandson, the man he's become." Lucas put his arm around her shoulders. "Not just her. You make me proud too. Proud to be your son, even if not by blood." "Especially not by blood," Maria corrected with a smile. "Because we chose this, and choices are more powerful than accidents of biology." They stood there, two survivors of a story neither had asked for, but both had turned into something beautiful. The sun went down completely, and the memorial lights cast a soft, welcoming glow. Outside, life went on. People strolled through Rosa Mendez Square, children played, birds sang. The world turned. But here inside, in the memorial's quiet, memories were preserved. Truths were honored, and the legacy of a courageous maid, and of all those she chose to protect, lived on. Maria looked around one last time. 45 years earlier, she had entered this mansion as a frightened young woman seeking a job. Today, she was gradually, gently, as age advanced, leaving it in the capable hands of a young man she had helped shape. The circle was truly complete. "Let's go," she said at last. "It's late, and tomorrow we have work to do." "There always is," Lucas agreed. "Justice never sleeps." "No," Maria smiled, "but people do, especially old ones." They climbed the stairs together, turning off lights, locking doors. Before leaving, Maria looked back one last time. The mansion that had once guarded so many secrets now proclaimed them openly. The basement that had been a tomb of truths was now a sanctuary of memory, and the maid who had inherited a nightmare had transformed it into hope. "Good night, Amelia," Maria whispered. "I hope you've finally found peace, and thank you for everything, for the trust, for the impossible inheritance, for forcing me to find a courage I didn't know I had." The night breeze blew softly, making the curtains sway, and for a moment, just a moment, Maria could have sworn she felt a presence, not frightening but comforting, as if someone, somewhere, were finally resting in peace. She stepped out, closing the door behind her. Outside, under a starry sky, Lucas was waiting. Ready? More than ready. And together, the maid-turned-guardian and the great-grandson turned heir walked toward the future, carrying with them the weight and the blessing of the past. Because legacy, true legacy, is not about what we accumulate. It's about what we choose to do with what we receive. And Maria Soares, who began with nothing and inherited everything, chose the path of truth, and it made all the difference. The story of the maid who inherited the billionaire's mansion and discovered the horror in the basement is, at its core, a story about choices, about what we do when confronted with inconvenient truths, about whether we choose comfort over conscience, wealth over righteousness. Amelia d'Avalon lived for decades under the weight of terrible secrets. She chose silence because the alternative seemed impossible. But in the end, she found a form of redemption by passing the responsibility to someone braver than herself. Maria Soares was not special in the conventional sense. She had no formal education, no money, no power, but she had something far more valuable: integrity. And when forced to choose between fortune and truth, she chose truth. Lucas Mendez Silva, a child when it all began, became the bridge between past and future, proof that justice, even delayed, matters. That honored memory can heal generational wounds. But there's a deeper question here, one that each of us must answer. What would you have done in Maria's place? It's easy to say we would choose justice when we have nothing to lose, but when faced with 73 million reasons to stay silent, how many of us would truly find the courage to speak? The truth is that most injustices in the world persist not because there are no good people, but because good people choose silence, out of fear, out of convenience, out of understandable self-protection. Maria reminds us that there is always a choice, and that choosing what's right, even when it costs everything, is worth more than any fortune built on blood. If you know someone living in a situation of abuse, manipulation, or injustice, don't stay silent. If you witness corruption or crime, don't look away. If you inherit power or privilege built on someone else's suffering, question it, investigate it, set it right. Because at the end of our lives, the question will not be, how much did we accumulate, but what did we do with what we had? Maria chose honor over fortune and turned a curse into a blessing. May her story inspire each of us to find similar courage when our own moment of choice arrives. Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you were in Maria's place, what would you do? Would you keep the 73 million and remain silent, or expose everything and lose the fortune? Be honest. There's no judgment here, only reflection. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more stories that make you reflect on courage, justice, and the true meaning of legacy. And share in the comments a time when you had to choose between what was easy and what was right. Your stories matter too, because in the end we are all guardians of truth, and what we choose to do with it defines not only our lives, but the world we leave behind.